Good Saturday morning, everyone. Today on Perspectives, the state continues, of course, to weather the COVID-19 pandemic, but it's now time to look towards the future. Alabama legislators say that they are doing just that in this year's legislative session. That's our focus today, in fact, as we talk with two legislators on both sides of the aisle who are working on issues affecting education, prison reform, and even if there is a possibility, the voters will be able to cast a ballot for or against having a statewide lottery. The lottery is still a big issue, of course, and whether or not voters will have a chance to have their say at the polls. A bill currently before the state Senate would authorize a lottery where tickets could be sold at stores, kiosks, and through a phone app. Now, you may remember in 1999, Alabama voters defeated a lottery bill, and proponents of the lottery hope to bring it before voters again in a state referendum. Turning to education, the largest education budget in Alabama history was approved by state senators in March. The supporters of the legislation say that the $7.67 billion education trust fund budget provides money to hire certified math and science teachers and financial incentives to keep them in the state. The bill also includes a 2% across-the-board pay raise for education employees. Finally, Governor Kay Ivey signed a lease agreement with a company specializing in operating prison facilities that would create two men's corrections facilities in Alabama. One of them would be built in Atmore. It is a 30-year lease agreement, and the governor said the taxes will not be used to pay for them. Still, some legislators say that building more prisons may not be the solution. Jobs and educational opportunities for released inmates should be the priority. Joining us this morning are Republican State Senator Greg Albritton, who represents District 22 in South Alabama, and who will also be talking with State Representative Barbara Drummond, a Democrat, and she represents District 103 in Mobile. The future of our state as our legislators meet to decide important issues. Perspectives returns after this quick break. Our guest this morning, Senator Greg Albritton, and we're talking about some of the things going on this year in the 2021 legislature. And Senator Albritton, a lottery bill passing the committee, looking to hopefully have more dialogue and discussion with it. How different is this bill to what you proposed 2 years ago?
Actually, the bill that Senator McClendon has dropped has been based upon the one that I carried 2 years ago. So those are very similar.
When you look at what happened to the previous attempts with looking at both the lottery as well as casinos, what seems to be the problem getting past these obstacles?
Well, the biggest problem is all the hands in the pie, if I might say so. You got Florida, Mississippi, Georgia, Tennessee. None of those states want us to involve ourselves in the gambling gaming industry. They do not. Nor does MGM or Harrah's or the Choctaws out of Mississippi or the Seminoles in Florida. All of those entities do not want Alabama to get control of the gaming industry here.
So what's the position for the folks in Alabama who say, well, we're going to make a decision based on what's best for Alabama?
That's what we need to do. The biggest difference, if I might, Eric, between the lottery bill and Marsh's previous bill, which was a more comprehensive bill, is that it was comprehensive. It dealt with all of gaming. It took every piece of gaming or gambling in the state and put it under control of the state so that the state could regulate it, it could cap it, it could control it, it could limit it, and it could tax it. The lottery bill does not do that.
So where do you think we're going to go from this point where we are now? Do you think it will eventually get in some form to the public to vote on it once again?
We hope so. I think we're going to have the lottery bill brought up on the floor Tuesday week, and at that point we'll have a discussion, and I believe there's going to be amendments that's going to be added to transform that simple lottery into the more comprehensive bill so that Alabama can take control of what it should, which is the gaming industry.
Moving on to education, the largest bill reported in state history, $7.67 billion for the Education Trust Fund. What do you want to see happen because of putting all this money into this particular bill?
Well, first off, understand that's not all the money. That's just the state money. When you count the federal money that's coming in, there's more billions and billions of dollars, more than double that. There's a lot of money rolling into Alabama, through not just in the education fund, but through several entities. I hope we're able to catch up with where we've lost our children and our education this past year. The online systems, I don't think work nearly as well as we had anticipated. I think there's a year loss in education, and we've got to recoup that.
What was one of the main things of that bill that you are most proud of making it through the Senate?
Well, most proud of? I have to admit that the point that our economy and our revenue is of a nature that we can make the claim that this is the largest budget we've ever passed for education. Again, that's just state money, state revenue. That's after we've gone through a year where we have stopped all collections for a number of months, where we have prevented people from working. We've had a 14–15% unemployment rate. That detriment to the economy, that shock, and yet we still have the largest revenue. That tells us that the state, we're doing something correct to be able to protect ourselves and our revenue and our way of life.
Speaking of the money you talked about coming from the federal government, nearly a $2 trillion relief plan passed recently, and money is coming to the state of Alabama. Now, who's going to control the appropriations of that? Only the governor's office, or will the legislature get an opportunity to make some decisions about where those funds are going?
Eric, now you're meddling into things you probably ought not to. Listen, you've got the classic fight between executive and legislative about who controls the money. But that's stated in the Constitution, and that is the legislature appropriates money. It doesn't matter where the source is. If it comes into the state, into the treasury of the state, it has to be appropriated by the legislature. It is my intent that we protect that right and duty.
So how does that happen?
We're working on it.
Okay. Also tied to that, supposedly now some of the legislators are considering expanding Medicaid due to the funds, as well as some of the new financial incentives for states like Alabama, which had not participated prior.
Yes, sir. There's a great deal of pressure on that. I would say there's a big push with big in capital letters to make this happen. The difficulty, Eric, is that no one is concentrating on how much the state is going to have to pay. They focus on the amount of money that the feds are going to supposedly give us, funnel to us to accomplish this increase. But if we do the 300,000 people, which that may be a question too as to how many there are, that's going to cost the state, in state dollars, out of the general fund, more than $300 million per year. We don't have that. I don't know where that's going to come from. So they can talk all day, and they usually do, about how much money's coming in from the feds, but the folks talking about that are the folks that's going to get that money. That's not the folks that have to pay the state money. So there's two sides to that coin, and I'm very, very cautious about moving forward with that until we get the idea set as to where the money is going to come from that we have to pay. Not to mention that all this money flowing in will only last 2 years, and then we'll be left with the 300,000 without the federal dollars. So that $300 million will automatically increase in 2 years, and we don't know by how much.
So you're always having to look long term. A question about the prison reform as well as the mega prisons that Governor Ivey is behind. We're spending roughly $3 billion over 30 years, and of course one of those prisons would be in your district. Where do you stand on this proposal? Well,
the governor, first off, our facilities have deteriorated. They are, we've got to have new construction. We've got to put in new facilities. The argument is not over that. The argument is how to do it. The governor has made the decision that she is going to move forward. She signed the contract. There will be a financial close on or before June 1st with construction beginning later in the year. That's my understanding. I don't know that we have the ability to stop that proceeding. So my job from the general fund chair position is to try to find that money, $3 billion. That's 95 to over $100 million every single year for 30 years. We don't have that money yet. I think it's interesting that the governor signed the contract on a Monday, and then the following day, Tuesday, sent her budget to the legislature, but there was nothing in that budget dealing with the contract that she just signed. Now, true that we don't have to make a payment for a little bit, but we need to start planning for this now because we don't have the money.
Sounds like there's still a lot of discussions and dialogue needed on that point. We thank you so much for coming and sharing with us, and of course we look forward to you returning and updating us as we move further into this year. A lot of major things on the table in Montgomery. We thank you so much, Senator.
Well, thank you for having us. It's always good to be here in Mobile and to see you, Eric.
All right, thank you. And now we're talking to Alabama State Representative Barbara Drummond about some of the going-ons in Montgomery with the state legislature. Thank you so much for joining us, Representative Drummond.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Let's look at several things that you all are very busy with in Montgomery. One thing that happened now, there's a new lottery bill on the table. Where do we stand with that?
Well, right now the bill is in the Senate. We're waiting to see what the contents of the bill would be. Right now, Senator McClendon, who is the sponsor of that bill, said it's going to be a clean bill. I think what is most important for me is that it will call for a vote of the people, so we'll give the people an opportunity to vote on the legislation. And some of the things that I think is more important for me is also to have companion legislation to say where the money will be spent.
Why do you think it's so difficult to get something off the committee platform, then to where it's voted on, but to finally get to the people? It's been since, what, 1999 that the people in Alabama have had a chance to vote on a lottery.
Well, I think that when you have so many folks from throughout the entire state, all of these legislators represent respective districts who have different interests. I really think that that is what it is, because for me, representing Mobile, my interest right now is making sure a sizable amount of that money is earmarked to education. Because I have felt and I still feel that we are underfunding education, and we need to do everything that we can to make sure that we can bring our systems up to par to not only represent us locally but also nationally. Mobile has some great educators, but they need the tools and the resources, especially now in this virtual marketplace that we're in, to make sure that our children are educated, because education is the soul of any community. It drives economic development and everything that goes on in the community. So I think that that has been probably the primary hang-up, is that all of us as legislators have an interest in making sure this money is spent wisely.
Well, speaking of education, just the largest supposedly in history passed recently, $7.6 billion education trust fund budget by the Senate. It's headed now to the legislature for the representatives. How do you feel about what has been passed?
Well, I've looked at that piece of legislation. I'm actually on the Ways and Means Education Committee, where it's now headed to, and we are very, very methodical in what we're looking at. And again, for me, I want to make sure our school system and our schools get an appropriate amount of money, because we've got some great programs that are going on. And we're very fortunate, because all of us were on pins and needles after COVID hit, because we really thought that, you know, the tax dollars and sales dollars were going to go down. But Alabama's real fortunate because we've done a good job in monitoring how those dollars are spent. So we're in good shape. So we're going to look very methodically at that budget. You know, we're going to look at higher ed, community colleges, as well as our K through 12 system, and make sure that all of those entities are funded properly. So it is a process that we take very, very seriously. I can tell you, after being on that committee, we probably work all the time in looking at the budget.
How do you feel about them wanting to create a salary matrix to be able to recruit those essential educators you were talking about, especially in math and science?
I like that matrix. We've got to work a little bit on the matrix itself, because that is where we have a deficit. We cannot recruit math and science teachers or in the STEM program for our systems, and that's throughout this whole state of Alabama. So we've got to come up with a different way of trying to do it. We were giving bonuses. It worked for a little while and then it didn't work anymore. So we're trying to come up with other creative measures in order to achieve that. Because say, take here in Mobile, for instance, we're really pushing our aerospace and our shipbuilding industry, and all of those come with very heavy math and science bases.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good point there for our area. Now, you are really concerned about economic opportunities. The Mobile Hair Bill, how does that work into your concerns?
Well, I'm really excited about the Mobile Hair Bill. I call it the Mobile Salon Bill. It is actually one that I am sponsoring, and after the pandemic hit, I think all of us were affected by those of us who go and get our hair done or our hair cut or our nails done or our skin care or whatever you want to call it. When the pandemic hit, that industry, I think it was one of the hardest hit industries economically, because in order to comply with the executive order, they just had to shut down. So they were really suffering. So this bill, which is Mobile Hair Salon Bill, it is going to help them, to give them another tool in the toolbox that they can now retrofit a bus or a van to go out and do whatever they need to do, and they can take it to the convenience of the customer. I sat back when I was putting this particular piece of legislation together. I said we can have food trucks, and then more importantly, we have trucks that go around town and groom your animals, your dogs.
Right.
So why can't we allow this industry? This will give them a tool to stay sustainable. There are many that were in that business have gone out of business because of COVID, but now this will give them an opportunity to stay in business. So I'm excited. That bill right now has already passed out of the House. It's passed out of the Senate committee, and hopefully when we return to Montgomery, it will be on the Senate floor and it will pass. I'm very hopeful of that.
That's always an interesting play on words there, where the Mobile Hair Bill came out of Mobile. I like that indeed. Barbara, Senator Drummond, as for the future there, Representative Drummond, looking at the prison reform issue, 3 mega prisons being considered by the governor, and of course one being nearby in Atmore. How do you feel about that, as also compared to some of the reform that you want to see happen?
Well, let me just say, I'm real curious, because I really think that we as legislators need a voice into where those prisons will be built. The governor's plan, though I think it was probably what she felt was in the best interest, but it has a few things that really have not taken into consideration those areas like Atmore, that these are economic engines in those particular communities. I don't think that this is an issue where we can just build our way out of it. Prisons, they are big business, but we have got to attack the policies that have led many of those persons into the penal system. And there's been several pieces of legislation for which I have supported, like one, making sure that those, when they exit prison, be able to get driver's license, something as simple as a driver's license, so that they can go and try to find gainful employment to be a re-entry back into society. Then there was another one one that we just voted out of the House. As a matter of fact, on last week, that was sponsored by, I call him Judge Hill. He's a former judge, but Representative Hill, that I thought was a very good piece of legislation that will allow those persons who have been in prison a number of years to actually reduce that time by 2 years and be placed under a probation with a probation officer while they're released with a ankle monitor. We've got to think and look at the policies so that we can reduce the number of those persons that are incarcerated in our prisons. That is what is going to have to happen, because this is not a problem that we can build our way out of. We've got to look at pardons and parole, because up until last year, we've got former Senator Cam Ward, who's now the executive director of Pardons and Parole. We're very hopeful that he is going to turn things around because he knows the problem. We were not letting people out of prison on parole. And these are some persons who have been in prison 25 plus years. They would come up for parole and they would deny them. We've got to look at that process because it's backing things up in the state of Alabama.
Well, reform definitely one of the major issues. It has to be addressing concerns.
And it's got to be policies looking at those issues and sentencing requirements.
Alabama State Representative Barbara Drummond, we thank you so much for coming and updating us on all the activity taking place in Montgomery. And of course, we'll be talking to you a few weeks later in the session this year as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Have a wonderful day.
All right. Thank you. And again, we thank both of our legislators, Senator Greg Albritton and Representative Barbara Drummond, for joining us here on Perspectives to share insights on a busy legislative session. Up next, almost daily here on Fox 10 News, we tell you about crimes, a lot of them, and the people who commit them. Unfortunately, though, for several different reasons, we're not able to share the stories of the victims as much. Because of that, there is a National Crime Victims' Rights Week. Next Saturday on Perspectives, we'll help raise awareness of the victims, their rights and services, and honor them and the professionals who serve them. Well, please join us here next Saturday morning at 9 for Perspectives as we discuss important issues and seek solutions. I'm Eric Reynolds. Have a great week ahead.
Thanks for watching Fox 10 News. Watch us live wherever you are on our mobile, our streaming news app, and you can also watch us on Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV.